Okay, let's dive into this. You know, some elections are remembered strictly for the cold, hard data, the turnout, the percentages, the margins. But others are remembered for the feeling they leave behind. And the Osun state governorship election in Nigeria was absolutely both. It was a race entirely defined by tension and this just incredible, almost unbelievable shift in momentum. So welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the anatomy of a massive political upset. So let's start right with the numbers. 403,371. That is the exact number of votes secured by the challenger, Ademola Adeleke. Now, to put that into perspective, this figure represents a huge mobilization effort. We're talking about a literal wave of support that materialized at the ballot box for a candidate that, honestly, a lot of critics initially underestimated. Now, you've got to contrast that with this number, 375,027. That was the final vote count for the incumbent governor, Gboyega Oyetola. And look, that's a seriously significant sum. It clearly reflects the reach and the sheer power of an established political presence. Yet, despite all that weight and machinery, it ultimately fell short. Which brings us to the margin. A difference of just over 28,000 votes separated these two candidates. I mean, in the grand scheme of statewide elections, that is a razor-thin margin. It's incredibly tight. But to truly understand what actually happened in Osun, we have to look way beyond the math. We have to look at the emotions of an electorate that was just determined to make their vote count. And this brilliantly illustrates the core dynamic of the race. On one side, you had the classic hallmarks of traditional Nigerian politics, right? Party structures, big machinery, heavy establishment backing, the whole shebang. But on the other side, Adeleke offered an entirely different playbook. He literally danced with the people. He laughed with them. He spoke their everyday language. And you know, critics just assumed, well, a dancing politician simply isn't a serious threat against a massive political monolith. But in Osun, that relatability transformed into genuine trust. And as we just saw, that trust translated directly into votes. After all we did for them, what did we get in return? It's a simple but incredibly heavy question. All across Nigeria, supporters often feel totally abandoned the second the votes are counted and the political alliances are formed. And in Osun, this deep, quiet sense of betrayal finally found a political home. It essentially turned the entire election into a referendum on a system that voters felt was just completely ignoring them. So how did they push back? That shared frustration actively transformed into real, undeniable campaign energy through what we can really call the coalition of the frustrated. This momentum wasn't driven by seasoned politicians cutting deals in smoky back rooms. No way. It was young people. It was market women, students, civil servants, and community leaders. It was ordinary citizens who suddenly realized that their collective vote was their ultimate leverage, uniting to make absolutely sure they were heard. And then you had this highly unique cultural soundtrack layered on top of it all. Pop star Davido, who happens to be Adeleke's nephew, became one of the most visible faces of the entire campaign. Now, this wasn't just your standard celebrity endorsement, not at all. It functioned as a massive cultural catalyst. It gave the campaign serious momentum and made politics feel personal, urgent, and surprisingly accessible for young Nigerians who had historically felt entirely disconnected from the political class. So when Election Day finally arrived, the message was crystal clear. They came out. They waited, they watched, they refreshed. They stayed planted at their polling units, they shared updates on their phones, and they compared figures. They absolutely refused to just go home and wait for politicians to dictate the outcome. They actively guarded their democratic process. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how technology perfectly met civic duty. Look, the process wasn't flawless, but the sheer visibility of results being uploaded online created an unprecedented level of public pressure. You had citizens, journalists, and observers all scrutinizing the data in real time. This digital transparency didn't erase every single doubt, obviously, but it made it virtually impossible for the outcome to just quietly disappear behind closed doors. So, we've seen the numbers, we've explored the emotions, and we've analyzed the strategy. But stepping back for a second from the specific event, what is the biggest lesson from Osun? What does this all actually mean for the broader democratic landscape going forward? Well, it shows us that political parties, big organizational structures, and established influence, they absolutely still matter, for sure. But none of those things are guaranteed to defeat a highly motivated electorate. Voters connected emotionally, they rejected a distant establishment, and they successfully turned public affection into concrete political action. Basically, Osun proved that power ultimately belongs to the people who are willing to stand in line under the sun and push back. Ultimately, the Osun upset serves as a powerful reminder. When people feel ignored, they organize. And when they believe their vote actually matters, they can completely change the story. So I'll leave you with this to ponder. If a determined electorate can defeat entrenched political machinery here, where will the people reclaim their vote next? Thanks for joining this explainer, everyone. Keep asking the big questions.